Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Swish City. We're going to be breaking down our power rankings going into the NBA season, looking at every team, ranking them from 30 to 1 based on their acquisitions, their departures, who they kept, players that I think fit in well with their squad, how they're growing with their team, and ultimately my record prediction for each squad. As you guys can tell from today's thumbnail, from today's title, that today's team we're going to be discussing is the Sacramento Kings. So without further ado, let's dive in and get into all the news. So with the Sacramento Kings, they have made some big moves this offseason and have kind of shaken up their roster a little bit. With Sacramento just 2 seasons ago, they were the 3 seed, a team that no one was really expecting to be that high, and won the Pacific Division with an unheartedly and disappointing first round loss to the Golden State Warriors in 7 games. The next season, they basically brought everybody back, thought they'd be able to run it again, and unfortunately for the Kings, dealing with some injuries and a tougher Western Conference, they fell to ninth seed in the Western Conference and were eliminated in the second play-in game, falling short of the playoffs. Therefore, the Kings went into this offseason focused and ready to make even more moves to change their roster, and they made them accountable. So let's dive in and let's look at them. First, looking at the re-signings, they went out and brought back Malik Monk on a 4-year deal, which most people thought Monk would go out into free agency and go get a bigger contract as those were presented to him in free agency. Monk eventually came back, said he liked Sacramento, liked with this team, liked the culture of the squad, and I really think that Malik Monk is a key ingredient for this squad, so losing him would have been detrimental. Making sure to keep him automatically puts his team in a higher light. They also went and re-signed Alex Len on a 1-year deal, who I think could be a solid backup center for them, even if he's not their backup center key piece for the future. When you look at their additions, they went out and got their big addition in DeMar DeRozan, who I think was and been screaming to go for this team for the last couple of seasons, as I think he's going to be a nice fit, seemingly with DeRozan and Fox. Now, yes, none of these 3 stars are really great 3-point shooters, but I do think that adding some additional scoring and defensive size at that wing position was desperately needed by the Kings, and they went out and traded Harrison Barnes and Chris Duarte to accompany this. They sent Harrison Barnes to San Antonio and sent Chris Duarte to Chicago in order to get DeMar DeRozan to make the contracts work. They also did another trade in the offseason at the trade deadline when they went out and acquired Jalen McDaniels from the Toronto Raptors and sending out Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov from their roster as well. Davion Mitchell was kind of log jammed in their forward group. Sasha Vezenkov hadn't really came over from Europe and hadn't really blossomed that much. And Jalen McDaniels, they felt could be a nice wing also to insert into their rotation that hadn't really gotten that much run in Toronto that they feel could be a nice addition. They also went out and got Jordan McLaughlin from the Minnesota Timberwolves and also signed Orlando Robinson off a Summer League standout season this year. So when looking at this roster and kind of looking at it from a contract standpoint, courtesy of Spot Track, we could see that the Sacramento Kings are entering training camp with their max amount of players at 21. Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, and DeMar DeRozan and Malik Monk, their 4 best players, topping that salary cap, which makes sense. When we look towards the bottom of this rotation, when looking at players either on two-ways or Exhibit 10s, there are some players that do stick out to me that I do know, Broderick Thomas specifically being one of them. But also looking at Terry Taylor, who I think could come into this organization and really spike up some stuff. Scala Bissier, who was a touted high school player that fell a little bit off in college, but then was able to get a role with the Kings in the NBA. He is back now after he spent the season in the G League with them last year, and Orlando Robinson as well, who we'll dive into a little bit. The Kings also, like I said, have some young pieces as well in Keon Ellis. They and Colby Jones from last season, and they also went and selected Devin Carter this year in the draft to add to that guard room. So moving off a player in Davion Mitchell definitely could have happened. With this Kings team, though, they are obviously star-studded with De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, and Domantas Sabonis being their three-headed monster and their three-headed gauntlet that they're going to be bringing out into the regular season and playoffs to want to compete. Now, obviously, they have some great role players as well, players like Malik Monk and Kevin Herter, who are that shooting and scoring outside. Keegan Murray, who I think are definitely going to help and add to this roster as well and make this Kings team a kind of force in the Western Conference. I have them coming in at 8th in the Western Conference. So let's dive in and let's look at these Kings players and looking at some players that I like and some players that I dislike. And if you're new to the channel, this is your first time watching, this isn't me critiquing a player on their skill wise, it's just how they fit and how I think they seemingly are going to work with this squad. With this Kings team, I do like a lot of these players. I have been fans of De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, Malik Monk, all of those guys as well. So I am very, very high on those guys, but I wanted to touch on some other names as well for this Kings squad. So first, we're going to be discussing and diving in on Keegan Murray, and that is the fourth round pick in the NBA draft not too long ago by the Sacramento Kings. Now, Keegan Murray was selected by the Kings because they felt they were still a competent team in the Western Conference, and with adding Murray already, who they felt was a player who was ready to play and not taking a project player, it would help the Kings in launching their rebuild. Now, they had just traded Tyrese Halliburton the previous season for Domantas Sabonis, so they definitely wanted to start this rebuild quickly, pairing him into that lineup. And Murray was a solid shooter and addition for this team. He's already made himself a popular name in Sacramento as a 3-and-D wing and one of the better 3-and-D wings in the NBA. I really like what he brings to the squad. Like I said, Fox, Sabonis, now adding DeMar DeRozan. They're not the most premier three-point shooters, so you need that around the stars because they can basically do everything else. Fox can control the pace of the game, and Sabonis can control the paint, while they have these other wings and shooters around them being able to score and add that 3-point punch when it's not going for them or when they need that open opportunity. Also, the role players are more likely to leave these players open compared to the star, which leaves these guys even more lethal. Now, Murray, I think, is going to see a rise with this team as well. I still see himself being inserted in this starting lineup. I believe that the starting lineup at this point is going to be De'Aaron Fox. We heard Keon Ellis is going to be in the starting lineup. I would suggest DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis. I really like that lineup right there for the Sacramento Kings for their starting five, and I think that's a top tier team in the Western Conference here with that starting five. Like I said, DeMar DeRozan's going to be another piece added, and Keegan Murray's only going to continue to grow as being a better player. And I can't wait to see how he gets better this season because he's a player I'm very high on in the NBA. And I know I would said I wasn't going to talk about some of these players, but I'm going to talk about DeMar DeRozan because he was one of the biggest free agent acquisitions. And like I said earlier when I was talking about him, this was a match that I had been wanting to see for a couple of seasons. With the Bulls kind of falling out with injury and dealing with playoffs, I've always felt that DeMar DeRozan had been needed to be on the move sooner rather than later, and I'm finally glad that it has officially happened. Even last season, I was screaming for this to happen just because Sacramento, I think, needs that push in that wing room. And when they went out and brought back Harrison Barnes, I was ultimately disappointed because not that Harrison Barnes is a bad player. He adds that shooting, he adds that defense at that position, but I felt like you needed that third X star. And I felt like the Kings thought maybe Murray was that star coming out of college. And after these couple seasons, maybe they've seen that he is good enough and that he can turn into that star, but they don't necessarily have it in him yet at this moment. So bringing in a guy like DeRozan, who's a little bit older, can still bring that punch for you right now, but as DeRozan starts to fade out, Murray then can lead in to that third star for this Kings team. And that's kind of the vision I kind of see them having at this moment. Now, DeRozan with Chicago last season was one of their primary players alongside Kobe White with Zach LaVine's injury. Now, with DeRozan coming into Sacramento, he's obviously going to have to work alongside players like De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. And already from training camp videos and already from stuff happening in the preseason, he's already seemed really locked in, really set forth with this team. I think his mid-range game is definitely going to add another element. I know that Fox is a very good mid-range scorer. I know Sabonis is a very, again, good scorer in the paint. So I think adding a player that isn't the best three-point shooter as that star does leave a lot of question marks for a lot of people with this team. But I do think that DeRozan's fit as a small forward is definitely going to help. He's going to be able to be that top tier guy, and he still can defend and he can still play that small forward position at a top tier level. He's one of the better ones in the league, so he's not going to slow down. He's not going to fray away, and he's going to be another ample figure for them to have in their playoff run. Like I said, when they had their playoffs 2 seasons ago, they had Domantas Sabonis, they had De'Aaron Fox, they had Malik Monk, they had that shooting, but they kind of lacked that third star to take them over the top to beat that Warriors team. And this year, unfortunately, they didn't have that star either. Now with DeMar DeRozan, I really think this eclipses them into those necessary conversations of them being in some contention for some good playoff series and some fun West Coast basketball. Now, like I said, when I was discussing the Sacramento Kings team, I really like this squad, and there's no one I really dislike on this team. Like, if I'm going to be honest with you, or like doesn't really fit. Maybe Kevin Herter, just because they have a lot of ample shooting. Maybe they could go out and get another wing piece or another backup big at that point. But still, I think there's a lot to tell with this team, with guys like Keon Ellis, with guys like Devin Carter, with guys like Kobe Jones, kind of seeing who's going to stand out and who's going to be those ample pieces. What we have to see, and then once the Sacramento Kings do find out those pieces, I do think then they will, make some trades, make some more moves to really stack up this squad to contend. Because the Kings, even in after making that DeMar DeRozan trade, were still in the rumors for Kyle Kuzma and still wanting him and still wanting to make moves. So I do think by the trade deadline, if the Kings are having a top tier season where they look really good in the regular season in those standings, they're gonna keep going, keep adding, and going to make this team a top tier team in the West. So with this team, personally, I don't have anything against anybody. I don't hate their coach. I don't think anyone on the players. Like I was saying, maybe Kevin Herter's a little bit of a weird fit at this point, but that's basically it. So I want to talk about a recent injury that's happened to a player that I was really high on, that I really wanted to talk about, but unfortunately that they suffered this injury and they're going to be out for a little while. It's definitely going to hinder their progress, and that is Orlando Robinson. Now, for most people that don't know who Orlando Robinson is, I wouldn't be surprised because he's not really a popular name in the NBA. Now, Orlando Robinson has been with the Miami Heat for a couple of seasons now as one of their backup bigs, but he's never really gotten that showcase, that really, ambition to really showcase himself and show his skill set basically. And with a player in Orlando Robinson, he was gifted that opportunity in the summer league because he's still young, he still has that ample potential, he can still blossom and still play there. So the Heat sent him there, and for the Heat, he looked really, really good. And I'm telling you, this guy is going to be nice. And I don't even think he played for the Heat in the summer league. Now that I think about it, I think he played for the Blazers. Maybe he played for some team in the summer league, and was playing so good that the Sacramento Kings just picked him up in the middle of the summer league. He didn't even get to play for Sacramento Summer League. He just got signed to a deal just because of that. And that's awesome to hear for a young player as well that's wanting to showcase themselves and getting themselves to that spot. That's what I want to see. But unfortunately for Orlando Robinson, after that really good summer league where he was looking like an elite shot blocker, was looking like he could be that ample rebounder, that true backup center behind Domantas Sabonis that maybe be able to integrate himself for the future as well, to solidify this team to have two dominant centers. Unfortunately, has sustained an injury and will be sidelined a couple weeks going into the season, which is just not good. And the Kings have an abundance of injuries kind of leaning up with this team going into the start of the season, and that's also not going to help out the team. And like I said, they do have other players at that backup center spot. They just brought in Scala Bissier, who they was on their G League team on an elite Exhibit 10. They also have Alex Len, who they just re-signed on a one-year contract as well. So I would not be shocked or surprised if those players get some, get the minutes until a player like Robinson gets back to kind of get his opportunity. But I'm really disappointed in the fact that he did get injured, because I think that if he was healthy at the start of the season, Orlando Robinson would be a name that, if you are like an NBA fan and you go on NBA Twitter and you know like NBA statistics, a lot of people would be talking about him, and he would be a name kind of going up the leaderboards and rising stock. So unfortunately, I think that it's tough that we're going to see a delay to that. But I do think that when he does come back with the Kings, he's going to be ready to go and be able to bring that for their squad. Now, going into the record predictions, like I said in the previous videos, you've checked them out. They've been a little bit wonky because I messed up the record numbers, so I do apologize that they are not top tier. But I do want to let all of you guys know that the record prediction for the Kings is 47-35, coming in here in this ranking at eighth in the Western Conference. Now that the injuries have kind of been sustained with the Kings, I am kind of flippy floppy with our last team that we discussed, the Rockets. I was very high on them. Those were the two teams I was kind of deciding by. And I do think that they can kind of toss and turn in that 8-9 spot. Ultimately, I think they'll both be in the play-in for sure, if not better. Like I said, some of these teams could have better seasons. Some of these top-tier teams could have injuries, and things could shake up. This Western Conference is very, very close with a lot of young talent, a lot of great stars, and a lot of fun teams to be looking at, and it's all in just personal bias and what you realistically believe in. Personally, I think the Kings with Sabonis and Fox have more under their belt with bringing in a player like DeMar DeRozan, with having a player Malik Monk, just continuing to basically add on to this team and continuing to get better. Even though that Rockets team is nice and is going to grow, I just still believe that these stars will overtake those Rockets, but I do think it is a very, very close discussion. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Like I mentioned, we've broken down basically up to, I believe now, for both conferences, the top or bottom 8 teams. So we got the top 7 on both sides just left. The season starts on October 22nd, and we're going to get through all of these before season start. And then once the season starts, we're going to have an abundance more of content throughout the year talking about the NBA for all of you guys on here. So if you guys do enjoy the content, make sure to hit that like button, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I do appreciate all of you guys' support, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out, everybody.